Anything before we bring the jury out? We're ready for the jury. Very good. But they all look alike, and I guess we do have our favorite seats. So there are no assigned seats, so if you sit anywhere you want to, whenever you want to, that will work out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and I hope you had a good evening. We're going to go ahead now and start with our second day of our proof. So the statement, call your next witness.
State calls Jeff McCliss.
Your officer, raise your right hand. Let's push you under oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Good morning.
Good morning.
We state your full name for the court, please.
Jeffrey Ross McCliss,
Thank you. And we spell your last name.
MCCLISS, like in Sam.
Thank you. And what is your current occupation?
I'm a narcotics officer with the 23rd Judicial District Drug Task Force and task force officer with the Drug Enforcement Administration.
So Agent McCliss, you have been employed, you're currently employed with the 23rd Judicial Drug Task Force and also assigned to the DEA.
Yes,
How long have you been in that position?
approximately since I think about 3 years now.
Okay. So in May of 2018, which agency did you work for?
At that time, I was with the Dickson County Sheriff's Office.
All right. And how long were you employed with the Dickson County Sheriff's Office?
Since 2005.
So what was your title in May of 2018?
I was a patrol lieutenant. I was in charge of supervising the sergeants.
Okay. Do you remember May 30th of 2018?
Vividly, yes.
What were you doing that morning?
That morning, I had not gotten up out of bed yet. I got a phone call I got several phone calls in rapid succession from some of the deputies that were on patrol that morning. They were concerned about Sergeant Daniel Baker. I got out of bed and went to my car to use the computer that's installed in there to get the GPS information to see where his car was, all the time sort of fielding the several calls that were coming in from Deputy Lashley and Deputy Richlick and dispatch.
Let's talk a little bit about GPS.
Sure.
Why were you able to access GPS? Was that one of your responsibilities?
Yes, it was one of my responsibilities to have the GPS installed in the cars and sort of maintain the data from it. There was a little, called a dongle. It plugs into the electronics of each patrol car, and it would at very regular intervals give us graphical GPS data as to the location of the car, its speed, its direction of travel, things like that, whether the lights were activated. There's a bunch of different options. I can't recall all of them that were in play in that moment.
And one of your responsibilities was to maintain this GPS system?
Yes, yes. So there's a graphical user interface console that you can sit down on, and you can actually plot which car was moving where, what their direction of travel was at any given moment, to a pretty high degree of accuracy.
And at some point, did you extract the data set for multiple patrol vehicles for the day of May 30th, 2018?
I did, yes.
Approach the witness.
Right.
Agent McCliss, contained on this thumb drive, is that the extraction of the data points from the GPS from May 30th, 2018?
It is.
Move that as the state's next exhibit, please.
So what are we up to, Misty? 87?
Okay, so Agent McCliss, we have, you've already testified there's data points. Now, are these data sets, can they be represented or put onto a screen and actually track where a vehicle is?
Yes. So the data points can be interpreted by the graphical user interface of the software, and what it'll do is actually allow us to see superimposed on a map the different data that's basically in a database or computer format. So you can see visually the direction of travel, the speed of the vehicle, the turns it makes, and how long it's set, those sorts of things.
Okay. And Agent, can you identify this disc?
Yes, this is the data. I'm not sure which format this data is in, but it is the data from Deputy Lashley's vehicle.
Okay, is that, I meant to, okay, Deputy Lashley's vehicle?
Yes.
Can you skip to the next screen? I'll move that exhibit as the next, or that disc is the next exhibit.
So that we're clear on the record, this will be exhibit 88, and it is GPS location or data on who's
Deputy Lashley.
Deputy Lashley.
Agent McCliss, is this the disc containing the data for Deputy Baker's patrol vehicle?
It is.
All right, and his unit was 500.
Yes, that's
All right.
correct.
So I'll move that as the next exhibit, please.
Will be exhibit 89.
All right, so Agent McCliss, are you able to see the large screen?
Yes.
Can we dim the lights, please? Is this the interface you were discussing as to observing the location of vehicles?
It is. Fleet analytics.
All right, Agent McCliss, and if you can't see the screen, walk over here. We have a date of May 30th, 2018. Can you see that?
Yes.
It's a time of 7:44:53 a.m.
Yes.
Now, that's not the correct time.
It isn't. So this software is sold to people all across the world. So depending on what your computer is set at, it can affect the way that the data is interpreted as far as the time. So either due to a daylight savings time or a time change, or just that computer not being updated, it's displaying approximately an hour wrong.
So the time is actually 6:44 a.m.
That's correct.
May 30th, 2018. The location we have is San Vineyard Road, Dickson County, Tennessee.
Yes.
What is the other?
Yellow represents a pause. If it sets for a longer period of time, it'll actually turn red. It just basically the software is interpreting that the GPS transmitter isn't moving at that point, and after a certain point, it'll say that it's a stop.
Were you aware that at some point on the morning of May 30th, Sergeant Baker was dispatched to the intersection of San Vineyard and Tibble Switch Road?
Yes.
Did his vehicle actually stop at San Vineyard and Tibble Switch Road?
Yes.
Obviously, you were part of the investigation in this case. He was, there was a crime scene at Tibble Switch in San Vineyard.
Yes.
Did this vehicle, Unit 500, leave the San Vineyard Tibble Switch intersection?
Yes. After.
Right. You can continue playing. Pause right there. Now, Agent McCliss, we have May 30th, 2018, 7:47 a.m., which is actually 6:47 a.m.
That's correct.
And this has the GPS as Chapel Cemetery Road. Is that correct?
Yes.
So Unit 500 has left the intersection of Tidwell Switch and San Vineyard, is traveling towards Chapel Cemetery Road.
Yes.
Now on Chapel Cemetery.
Yes.
What happens at Chapel Cemetery Road?
I believe the vehicle, if we continue playing it, will reverse direction, like make a U-turn and go back in the opposite direction.
Is that what happened?
Yes.
So after the shooting at Tidwell Switch and San Vineyard, the vehicle leaves and goes down San Vineyard and turns onto Chapel Cemetery Road,
Mhm.
and it turns around and doubles back.
Yes, that's correct.
Now we're back at the intersection of Tidwell Switch and San Vineyard,
Yes.
and the time is 6:13 a.m.
Yes.
So that took about how many minutes?
Between 4 minutes.
So after the shooting, there was about 3 to 4 minutes where the vehicle went one direction, turned around, and came back to the intersection.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, and Agent McCliss, is this the final location of Unit 500?
It's hard to see without the actual terrain superimposed on it, but yes, that looks exactly like.
And that's in Third Road, Hickman County,
Yes.
Tennessee?
Yes.
And the time was 6:58 a.m.
Yes, that's correct.
Now I'm going to refer you to what's already been moved as an exhibit as to Deputy Lashley's GPS coordinates and his same interface.
It's all the same software and everything, and the time change applies to this as well.
Okay, Agent McCliss, you can see that Deputy Lashley's vehicle is now stopped on San Vineyard Road at 7:59. Is that correct? Which would
Yes.
actually be 6:59 a.m.
Yes, that's correct.
And he is in the general area of the intersection of San Vineyard and Tidwell Switch. Is that
Yes.
correct? Thank you. Now, I want you to try to remember that time of 6:59 a.m.
Okay.
And if you would, please identify this photograph.
Yes, this is a still image of the two GPS tracks that we just watched.
So looking first at Sergeant Baker's vehicle at 6:50 a.m.
Mhm.
It's already been to Chapel Cemetery Road and it's come back.
Yes, and
It's now going northward on Tibble Switch
that's correct.
and going over here at 7:50 a.m. with Deputy Lashley. His vehicle is south on Tibble Switch.
That's correct.
So is this approximately when the two vehicles pass?
Yes, and
And that's what this graphic represents.
yes, that's what's shown on.
Move that to the next exhibit.
90.
So while this is still on the screen, to be clear, Agent McCliss, after reviewing all the GPS data, Unit 500, which is Sergeant Baker's vehicle, it actually leaves Tibble Switch and Sam Vineyard, travels generally westward on Sam Vineyard, turns around on Chapel Cemetery, comes back to the intersection of Tibble Switch, and then passes or intersects with Deputy Lashley?
Yes, that's correct.
Agent McCliss, I'm going to ask you to identify this photograph.
This is a picture of that same area. It has the satellite data, so you can see the actual terrain.
And you can label, we've got 3 yellow tacks on this map.
It is.
Yellow tack represents the intersection of Sam Vineyard and Tibble Switch.
Yes,
And this yellow tack labeled Chapel Cemetery Road, the approximate location of where Unit 500 turned around,
yes, it is.
drove back to the intersection. Tibble Switch and Sam Vineyard.
That's correct.
Is it here where Deputy Lashley and Unit 500 intersect?
Yes, it'd be in that stretch right there.
And then Unit 500 continues in this direction,
Yes,
coming to a final location of generally in this area right here.
that is correct.
Move that to the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit 91.
So Deputy Lashley, I'm sorry, Agent McCliss, still early. Agent McCliss, that morning on May 30th, 2018, we've heard a body cam, I believe is you speaking over the phone to Deputy Richland. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You actually give him directions to get to the location of Unit 500, the final location.
Yes, using the data from the same system that we just walked through.
And did you also drive to that location?
I did.
Do you know how many people got there ahead of you?
I believe there was 2 that were ahead of me, and then I arrived almost simultaneously with a couple others.
So you were one of the first persons on the scene.
That's correct.
Can you describe how you arrived at this location? Did you park on the road or did you drive into the field?
I parked on the road.
And what happened then?
I was traveling down the path towards where Deputy Richlick was. At some point, I believe Agent Adams requested permission to break the window on the vehicle. I gave permission to break the window on the vehicle, and shortly thereafter, somebody started hollering for a medical bag. So I started running back towards my vehicle when somebody going the other direction actually said that they had a medical bag. So I started running back towards the point that's labeled the final location of Unit 500.
So your understanding is Unit 500 in this location, the doors were locked.
Yes,
Somebody over the radio asked for permission to break the window.
that is correct.
And are you the person that gave that permission?
Yes,
You had the authority to do so?
I did.
And when you approached Unit 500 in the field, what did you observe?
The front window was open, was smashed. The doors were open, and Sergeant Baker's body was partially out of the vehicle.
So the first arriving officers had broken the window and
Yes.
opened the doors?
Yes,
And Agent McCliss, can you identify this right there?
yes, I can.
And what is that?
This is Sergeant Baker's body, his legs out of the back seat of the car, Unit 500.
Is that how he appeared when you arrived on the scene?
Yes,
And you were the third or fourth person to get to the patrol unit?
yes, I was seconds behind the other ones.
So is this the driver's
That's the driver's side rear door.
Or just exhibit 92.
Agent McCliss, can you identify this photograph?
Yes, I can. It's a close-up of the body of Sergeant Daniel Baker.
All right, so I want to talk to you about a couple of things in this photograph. One, we're looking at the back seat of a patrol vehicle, is that correct?
Yes,
What is
that's
this? This is the back seat.
it is.
The actual seat. What is this blocky black thing here? Up here, is that a partition of some type?
Yes, it's a metallic partition. They use it for to support the grate that's between the passengers and the drivers.
Is this how Sergeant Baker's body appeared to you as it wedged into this position?
Yes,
Now, the next thing I want to draw your attention to is this. What is this?
that's a holster. It's an empty holster. It's
Empty holster? No weapon present?
no weapon present.
And it's kind of hard to see. I mean, that's to describe what you see here.
That's Sergeant Baker's impact weapon. It's called an ASP. It's an expandable impact weapon that were issued.
Is that standard issue?
It is. I issued it to him.
And you issued?
Yes, that's what was one of my responsibilities as a lieutenant, was to issue equipment. So it been either issued by me or inspected by me.
Where is the ASP worn on?
It varies. I believe he carried his, I know it's somewhere on his belt. I couldn't tell you the exact position of it. That's down to personal preference.
But it's worn off the belt?
It is worn on the duty belt in a usually a plastic or a leather holder.
In this photograph, the ASP is actually wedged in between what appears to be the side and his arm.
Yes.
Move that to the next exhibit.
You want just exhibit 93?
So, Agent McCliss, you issued Sergeant Baker his ASP. What other components of his duty belt is he issued?
Everyone's issued a holster, handcuff carrier, handcuffs, impact baton, flashlights, flashlight carriers, your basic leather gear and uniform items.
So on a duty belt, we would have a holster for the service weapon,
Mhm.
an ASP, or impact baton.
Yes,
What about to carry extra magazines?
magazine holders, that would be in
Those are attached to the belt?
yes,
Is there a holder for a flashlight
yes,
that's attached to the belt?
yes,
And the flashlight is issued to deputies and sergeants?
yes.
Handcuffs are issued?
Handcuffs.
What about,
There's a large amount of flexibility. Certain officers prefer to carry certain things, so they'll purchase their own. So you can't guarantee in any given moment that 100% of the items on their belt will be things that were issued by the department just due to personal preference. And the department never enforced any sort of regulations as to where you could carry the things. It's down to body mechanics. Everybody carries their gear in slightly different positions.
that makes sense. So you're issued a duty belt with the proper equipment to carry these things, but you can replace certain items with your personal choice,
Yes,
like a flashlight.
sure.
I could go out and purchase a flashlight that I like better than the department issued flashlight.
Absolutely. So it's very common, often done.
And can you identify this photograph?
That is a picture of the same scene viewed from the opposite end, from the passenger seat there. There's a bottle of oil and
What's this item here?
that's Sergeant Baker's wallet.
Sergeant Baker's wallet? Yeah. And this is a bottle of oil of some type?
Yes,
And this is kind of the reverse side from the passenger side. Is this the partition you were describing?
it is.
So you couldn't slide through on the floor of the rear seat?
Right. No, there's not enough room.
Move that to the next exhibit.
Exhibit 94.
And last photograph, Agent McCliss. Can you identify that?
That's the front seat of Unit 500, as it was when I arrived.
And you gave the command to break out this window?
I gave permission, the agent that was on duty requested it.
Is that what we're seeing here, the broken glass?
Yes,
Broken glass in the seat?
absolutely, yes.
Now, one item that is probably not recognizable to everybody is this pole. Do you know what that goes to? Is that
It's a
pole?
pop-up tent. Yeah, like a not a full tent, but what we call like an awning or like a portable thing that you would use for like a yard sale or something like that.
Was a pop-up tent or an awning put over the vehicle?
Yes,
Why was that done?
preservation of evidence. It appeared that if I recall correctly, I believe that there might have been weather forecast for something. Also, there was a lot of helicopter traffic and things like that. It's probably for a certain amount of privacy, so that the people that were collecting the evidence could.
So, and I just want to be clear, so everybody's on the same page. Pop-up tent has nothing to do with the actual crime.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I think that's probably best practices for any sort of scene that you might think that has the potential to get rained on.
Okay. And last few questions, Agent McCliss, can you describe some of these items we see in the front passenger seat?
Sure. There's that's the issued laptop, the patrol bag is strapped to the seat there that has a bunch of different items in it. There's various forms and papers that are required to be kept, ticket books and whatnot. So that's a bag to carry those sorts of things. There's the actual mount for the laptop. It's mounted to the front seat post.
And finally, what are these items?
Oh, there's a rifle and a shotgun. The shotgun's a Benelli Nova, and that's an AR-15.
Standard equipment.
Yes, those are both issued items.
Who has the next exhibit, please?
We're up to this.
I'll pass the witness.
Emily, do you have questions?
Morning.
Morning.
It's Agent McCliss now.
Yes.
All my notes say lieutenant throughout, so I apologize.
That
if I
was
mix it up.
at the time.
You had testified you had, before you even got out of bed, you were getting rapid succession phone calls.
Yes.
I know it's been a while. Do you remember about what time that was?
I don't remember the exact time. It would have been sometime between 6 and 6:30, I would guess.
Okay. I don't even think that Deputy Lashley arrived on scene until about 6:45. Is that about right?
I believe you'd have to refer to the body camera. The body camera would be more accurate in what time the deputies were calling me. In my recollection.
Fair to say you don't remember exact times then?
No.
Okay, that's fine. I know you vividly remember it. I can understand why, but you don't remember when exactly you were getting out of bed and things like that.
Right.
Understood. Were you getting phone calls from more than Deputy Lashley and Deputy Reichlich?
Dispatch. I believe I got a call from dispatch, or I made several calls in that intervening time as well to dispatch. I don't remember who initiated which call.
Just there was a whole lot of chaos.
Yes, there was a slew of calls going back and forth between me and those deputies and the dispatch.
And to your knowledge, were there any photographs taken prior to breaking the glass and opening the doors of the patrol car?
None other than the images that would have been captured by whoever had their body cameras.
And we saw one photo of the front passenger, the front seat. Well, somewhat calls for speculation, but this would have been difficult for somebody to sit in the front seat of this patrol car, right? Would you agree?
Difficult to sit in the front seat. The
Front passenger seat.
I mean, I suppose.
I mean, there's a big computer that takes up a big portion of that passenger side cabin, right?
No, it's a mobile mount. You can slide it over.
Okay.
And as far, I mean, we've all ridden in the front seats of cars that have had stuff in them. You just jump in them. Depends on how desperate you are to get where you're going.
True enough. And this is another photograph, if I can pass it to the witness. Let me. That's just an alternate view of the front seat, a photo taken from the passenger side, correct?
Yes. Okay. I think you can see in this picture that the mount is slid over more towards the center than it is blocking anything in the passenger seat.
Right, but there's a whole lot of other stuff that's blocking the passenger seat. Somebody would have to sit on all that stuff and move it out of the way and move it again if they were sitting there, correct?
Yeah, they would have to have positioned it so that they could sit.
Okay. I'd like to make that the next exhibit if it please the court.
What does exhibit 96?
I'll pass the witness. Thank you. Oh, wait, 1 second.
No further questions?
I think you may be still consulting.
And just to verify, did Sergeant Baker's patrol vehicle have any dash camera features that you were aware of?
No.
Thank you.
Now, General Cross, do you have any other questions?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Agent Nicholas. You are discharged and the
Thank you,
door
Your
of your
Judge,
business.
we're not going to release him from his subpoena. He's finished for today, but we do want to keep
All right. You are not discharged. You are allowed to go back outside, but you will remain under the rule. So please don't watch any of the proceedings or let anyone talk to you about the other testimony. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
State may call your next witness.
State calls Jack Adams.
Let's step right up here, please. Raise your right hand and face our clerk so she can place you under oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Good morning. Will you state your full name, please?
Jackie Ray Adams,
And spell your last name.
ADAMS,
Mr. Adams, where do you live?
Bon Aqua, Tennessee,
Okay, and is that in Dickson or Hickman County?
Hickman.
Hickman County. And specifically, do you live on Bear Creek Road?
Yes, sir.
How long have you lived there?
15 years.
15 years. And you were living on Bear Creek Road on May the 30th of 2018?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember being at home on the morning of May 30th, 2018?
Yes.
And what happened?
After watching newscast, had a bulletin come over about a shooting. And come find out it was close by a farm property. And my brother called and said, did you see the news? I said, yes. And I just started looking out the door and I saw movement and I thought maybe it was a deer. Come find out it was somebody. So they started walking down the driveway toward the cabin. Then they disappeared behind the shop, a workshop. So I went out to check, see where they went.
Okay. So before we go any further, let me kind of get an idea of your property. It's kind of a large piece of property that you own. Is that right?
Yeah, 40 acres.
40 acres. Part of the land is cleared, but some of it's got timber on it
Yes, sir.
and a pond.
Yes, sir.
and it borders a couple of different roads. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Can you identify this photograph, please? Or it's actually a map.
Yes, that's aerial view of where I live.
That's the aerial view of where you live. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And are you pretty familiar with all the roads around your place?
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the intersection of Tibble Switch and San Vineyard?
Yeah, they got the road.
It's kind of mislabeled, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That's why I wanted you to look at this map, because Google don't always get it right.
Yeah,
What's the name of this road right here?
that's Pumpkin Branch.
We see Pumpkin Branch, the actual creek. right
Yes, sir.
here. So this map clearly came from Google Images. This is Pumpkin Branch that kind of goes north and south,
Yes, sir.
and not Lee Moss Road.
No, Lee Moss is that one that cuts off to your right there. Yeah, yeah.
What's mislabeled is just right
That's just Pumpkin Branch Road from there.
here. This is Bear Creek Road.
Yeah.
And your property is all this area right in here.
Well, not all of it, partially. On the right-hand side, running parallel to Pumpkin Branch. Yeah, right.
So this is your pond.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Tap right here. Is there a cabin where you live?
Yes, sir.
And do you have some outbuildings right there?
Yes, sir.
What, just exhibit 97?
So back where the yellow tack is dropped, it is labeled Castro-Miles arrested. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Tell us what you saw from your cabin on the morning of May 30th.
She was walking down the driveway toward my cabin and hid underneath the building.
Okay. So did you go out onto the front porch of your cabin?
Yes,
Ask you to identify this photograph. Is that a viewpoint from the front of your cabin?
yes, sir.
Is the same picture up here on the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, so if this photograph is taken from the front of your cabin, this is an outbuilding, is that right?
That workshop.
Your workshop. And is underneath this workshop, is that where the defendant was arrested? Or that's where she was found?
Yes.
Which direction, describe exactly what you saw when you first looked out your window and saw the.
Well, I could only see her walking down the driveway because of the trees, because some of the trees are gone now. But at the time they weren't, but I only saw her for a few seconds before she disappeared behind the building.
See her out of this area?
Yes, from that area up. No, to the left, a little left.
This way?
Yeah, right in there, on top of you, right in there.
So there's a road or a driveway that continues on through here?
Yeah, driveway's on the other side.
Let's go into a pasture in the back.
Yes, sir.
We saw movement in this area.
Yes, sir.
Could you see what color clothing the person had on?
Well, look, the shirt or the hoodie looked kind of tan in the sunlight and shade, it in and out, so.
Couldn't really tell what you saw at first.
What's it?
Could you tell what exactly you saw at first, whether it was a man or a woman?
No, I couldn't tell. No.
Too far away.
Well, it wasn't so much that, it's, I only saw it for a few seconds and she had her head down. I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman.
I'll move that to the next exhibit, please.
Being worked as exhibit 98.
And Mr. Adams, can you identify this one?
That's pretty well the same photo.
Just another view.
Yeah, just closer view, yeah.
I'll move that as the next exhibit.
Worked as exhibit 99.
Mr. Adams, can you identify this photograph?
All right,
Is that your workshop?
yes, sir, part of it,
And that's looking underneath it from one side?
yes, sir.
All right.
This is the side I was on.
Okay, you came out of your house and walked down this side of the workshop.
Yes, sir.
I'll move that as the next exhibit.
Yes, sir. I just saw someone underneath there. A silhouette's all I could tell. I could tell.
You couldn't see anything but a silhouette,
Yes, sir.
but you knew somebody was underneath.
Yes, sir.
Move that as the next exhibit.
100.
And can you identify this photograph?
That's the wood lot at the direction where she came.
Can we see the driveway better in this photograph?
Right. Right, that's the driveway. Right there where you got your pen. That's where I saw the first move.
So from your cabin, you saw some movement
Right there.
and a person or something continued down
Yes,
and then went underneath your shed.
yes, sir.
Move that as the next exhibit.
101.
Thank you.
Can you identify this photograph?
Yeah, it's the other side of the workshop.
So we've kind of just taken photographs all the way around the workshop, right?
Yes, sir.
And what is that orange thing on the side?
Well, that's the side she came out of.
What's that letter on the side? Is that a T? Are
Tennessee.
you a Tennessee fan?
Yes, sir.
I'll move that as the next exhibit.
102.
Last photograph, Mr. Adams, can you identify that?
That's where she came out.
We see the T on the side of the shed of your workshop.
To the right of the photo where that plexiglass is.
Right here.
Yeah, to the right of that little.
So,
To, yep, yes, sir.
all right, so tell us how she actually came out. What happened? What did you do?
Well, she came out, my brother, he was on that side, and he called it, she came out, of course, I heard no mention of a woman.
Right.
So, I went around and she was standing there and, I ordered her to the ground and, she did, no problem. And, I felt over her hoodie pocket on the outside to see if she had a handgun. It didn't feel anything, just other objects, small objects, that's about it.
Okay. Do you know what object she had inside the hoodie?
Could be a cell phone or smaller objects.
Did she ask you for help?
No,
No?
No.
Did she ask to use your phone?
no.
What did she say to you?
I asked, I said, where are you going? She said, she's trying to get to the main road. She's lost.
She said she was lost,
Yes, sir.
trying to get to the main road.
Yes, sir.
What was she upset or angry or what was
Well,
her
she seemed to be angry, I
angry?
guess because me stopping her,
Okay.
but, I asked where he was, not mentioning the name. And she said she didn't know what I was talking about.
She had no idea what you were talking about.
I said, what was he wearing? She said, black pants, black, shirt, black cowboy hat, black cowboy boots.
She told you he was wearing a cowboy hat
Yes, sir.
and cowboy boots.
Yes, sir.
Did I make that final photograph an exhibit? If not, I want to. I'll move that photograph you have in your hand. I'll move as the next exhibit.
I show 103 is the last exhibit, and that would have been this one that we just talked about.
So, Mr. Adams, did she ask to use your phone?
No,
No. Said she was trying to get to a main road.
just it.
All right, I'll pass the witness.
Finally,
Now, Mr. Adams, I take it you saw there was a shooting near you on the news, is what your testimony was, correct?
Say it again, please.
I'm sorry. You said you heard that there was a shooting nearby your home,
Yes.
and then you saw somebody running through your yard.
No, they didn't run through the yard. They came down the driveway.
Okay, well, on your property,
Yes, sir.
uninvited,
Yes, sir.
and I assume you armed yourself.
Yes, sir.
And I don't blame you. I would have probably done the same in your situation. So did the news give you any sort of description as to who to be on the lookout for?
I'm sorry.
Did the news give a description of who to be on the lookout for?
No.
No description of anybody? Okay. No names or anything like
No.
that yet?
No,
And you saw somebody going through your property and you, as we said, armed yourself, went around and you ordered them to get out from under your workshop.
yes,
Okay. And did she appear out of breath to you, or did
No.
she appear distraught or anything like that? You
No.
just said she appeared upset or angry or something like that?
just angry,
Angry.
probably.
And when you say she appeared angry, what exactly, why would you conclude that?
Upset, I stopped her, I guess.
Upset you
I
stopped?
still not know, I still didn't know she was involved in anything, if she was.
That's fine. And I mean, I'm just asking for what you saw. You know, did you see anybody else on your property?
No,
And you called the law
yes,
and you waited for them to come get her.
my brother called law, when I went out to check, see who it was, I called him, told him to call the law and come down.
About what time did you first see her?
I'd say around 10:20 a.m., something like that.
10:20. You sure on the time or just guessing?
I'm guessing around
Guessing.
that time.
Okay, so around the 10 o'clock time period, you're not exactly sure when. I mean, this happened 4 years ago, right?
Yeah,
So you don't remember every detail. I'm sure.
between 10:30.
10:30. Okay. And you remember what she had on, Miss Erica?
Well, yes, she had a pink hoodie on and black shorts.
Black shorts. Okay. And now she described another person to you. Now she acted, I was kind of confused at your testimony. You asked her who was with her,
Yes,
but you didn't see anybody else with her.
no,
Okay, so you were just making sure nobody else was creeping around your property, I assume.
right.
Okay, and she said nobody to her knowledge,
No, she's the only one I saw.
and she said there wasn't anybody else with her.
Yes,
And then you said, what's he look like or something
Yes.
like that? Well, why'd you ask that? I don't,
well, because the shooting and being a police officer, a former police officer, normal questions, I guess.
you're just being careful.
Yes, sir.
And then she gave you a description of somebody wearing black clothing.
Yes, sir.
Are you sure about this cowboy hat thing?
What you said?
You're pretty positive about that?
Yes,
And did you ever tell that to law enforcement that
yes,
somebody was wearing a cowboy hat?
yes.
Do you remember who you told it to?
TBI agent
TBI agent?
and deputies.
So you told it to multiple folks.
Yes, sir. State.
And you said cowboy boots as well?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember the name of the law enforcement officials you were speaking with when you told them this thing, the cowboy hat, boots, things
No,
like
sir.
that? No?
No.
And when you felt around in her pocket, did you remove whatever was in her pocket
No,
or you just
no.
left it there?
No,
And so when you say you thought it may have been a phone or keys or something, you're not really sure, you didn't
No, sir.
check? Okay. Pass the witness, thank you.
Anything further? Thank you, sir. You may step down and you may leave if you would like or stay if you'd like.
thank you, Your Honor.
For Crouch, you may call your next witness.
State calls Tiffany Gooch.
Please come face our clerk and raise your right hand.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Will we state your full name for the court, please?
Tiffany, Tiffany, Gooch, Gooch.
And Ms. Gooch, where are you currently employed?
I'm currently employed at General Motors.
What do you do there?
I am an employee relations investigator.
An investigator of employee relations?
Yes,
All right. How long have you been in that position?
since February 2022.
So you kind of just started?
Yes,
And before February of this year, where were you employed?
the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
TBI?
Yes,
And what was your position there?
I was a criminal investigator
And how long were you a criminal investigator for the TBI?
since February of 2016.
Were you working on the morning of May 30th, 2018 for the TBI?
Yes,
And did you respond to Dickson County?
yes.
How many days did you spend working a case in Dickson County?
It was roughly around 3 days.
3 days? Okay. So I think the context has already been said that this initial crime happened on May 30th, 2018. Is that right?
Yes,
But I want to jump forward to June the 1st of 2018. Were you in Dickson County on that day?
yes,
And were you present for the apprehension of Steven Wiggins?
yes,
And when he was arrested, was he taken to a location in which you did an inventory of his personal property?
yes.
All right. First thing I'm going to ask you to identify is this map. Are you familiar with those locations?
Yes,
And does the map in your hand, what we see on the screen?
yes,
We've already heard testimony about the arrest of the current defendant, Ms. Castro-Miles, this general location. Is it your testimony today that Mr. Wiggins was arrested here?
yes.
I'm not tall enough to reach. Is that, what road is that where he was arrested?
That was Stinson Road.
Stinson Road? And is there a creek that crosses Stinson Road?
Yes,
Literally crosses the road?
yes,
And that's where Mr. Wiggins was taken into custody?
yes,
And he was arrested on June 1st of 2018?
yes.
All right, I'll move that map as the next exhibit, please.
What is exhibit next in order, which should be 25.
And Agent Gooch, can you identify this photograph?
So this is the creek that runs through Stinson Road.
And this is a screen capture from a dash cam video of a highway patrolman, is that correct?
Yes, yes,
The defendant was arrested on the other side of the creek.
yes,
Literally Stinson Road goes underneath and crosses the creek.
yes.
That's the next exhibit.
106.
Agent Gooch, had there been an ongoing manhunt for Mr. Wiggins for about 2.5, 3 days?
Yes,
Is it fair to say this entire area had been saturated with law enforcement,
yes,
aerial and ground?
yes.
And can you identify this photograph?
So as you can see, there is an indention within the forestry here, and that is where Mr. Wiggins was found. Yes,
Where it kind of looks like this greenery is mashed out and broken?
yes,
That's just on the other side of the tree.
yes,
Move that as the next exhibit.
107.
And we see a timestamp of June 1st, 2018. He was in fact arrested on June 1st, 2018.
yes,
After he was taken into custody at this location, you also took him to a different location to do this property inventory, is that correct?
yes.
Where was that?
That was at the hospital, and that was at our command post. We were posted up behind that hospital.
So there was a command post established several miles from this location at a hospital.
Yes,
And can you identify this photograph?
and this is Mr. Wiggins' backpack.
Okay. And now we'll move that photograph as the next exhibit, please.
Wait.
Is that 108?
That's 107, Judge.
Reason I went to law school instead of accounting, 107.
That's the reason I'm asking y'all. So, way down.
This will be 107.
Thank you.
All right, Agent Gooch, I have several photos that I want to go through, so kind of go slowly so we can keep the numbering in order.
Okay,
But I'll just ask you to identify them one at a time.
okay.
Can you identify this?
Yes, this is Mr. Wiggins' backpack with a black handgun.
And do you know the specifics of this handgun? You may not be able to see it in this photograph.
I do know that this is a Glock, but I cannot tell the caliber.
I'll move this photograph as exhibit 108. And the next photograph.
And this is a Glock 33, 357.
And Agent Gooch, looking at this photograph, Glock 33 caliber 357, this was the personal weapon of Sergeant Daniel Baker, is that correct?
Correct. Yes,
It was recovered in Steven Wiggins' backpack.
yes.
Move this photograph as exhibit 109. Is this another view of the Glock that belonged to Sergeant Daniel Baker?
Yes,
Move that as exhibit 110. Agent Gooch, we still see the Glock 357, Glock 33 caliber 357, and is this the magazine that belonged to this weapon?
yes.
I'll move this as exhibit 111. Agent Gooch, can you describe this photograph?
So this is the Glock 33 caliber 357. So basically we have ejected the magazine and unloaded the magazine. Also, the bullet that is to the left, that was the bullet that came out of the chamber.
So there was a live round in the chamber and then a fully loaded magazine,
Correct.
357 ammunition.
Yes,
I'll move that as exhibit 112. And Agent Gooch, is this a close-up of the live ammunition?
yes,
And is that a 357 SIG round?
yes.
Move that as exhibit 113. And Agent Gooch, can you describe this photograph?
Yes, this is just the inside of Mr. Wiggins' backpack.
That appears to be some more ammunition, is that correct?
Yes,
Move that as exhibit 114. Sure, absolutely. That was 114, correct?
That is 114.
Thank you. And next photograph, Agent Gooch. So again, this is all the contents of Steven Wiggins' backpack.
yes,
It appears you've got some just ammunition, live rounds.
yes,
All right, move that as exhibit 115. And Agent Gooch, is this a close-up of one of those live rounds?
yes.
And can you identify the markings on this shell or this round?
I believe this is a 45.
And it may be hard to see on your photograph,
Yes.
but is this the lettering BLAZER?
Yes,
Laser?
yes,
Is that a brand of ammunition?
Yes.
All right. Move that as the next exhibit, 116. Agent Gooch, can you identify this?
yes. This is just another compartment within Mr. Wiggins' backpack.
Okay, and there's a couple of things I'd ask you to pay some attention to in that. What's at the top of the backpack?
So that'll be his identification card, Mr. Wiggins' identification card. There's some other live rounds of ammunition in there and another black handgun.
Move that as exhibit 117. And Agent Gooch, is this just a close-up of the interior compartment of the backpack?
Yes,
Move that as exhibit 118. And Agent Gooch, is this a close-up of Steven Wiggins' identification card,
yes,
photo identification? Move that as exhibit 119. Okay, Agent Gooch, this appears to be a second weapon, is that correct?
yes,
You've already identified in previous photographs Sergeant Baker's personal weapon, the 357. Do you know what type of weapon this is?
I want to say that this is the high point, the 45 high point.
I'll move this as exhibit 120. Wouldn't you know we have another photograph of it? And from this photograph, can you make out the model and caliber weapon?
Yes, this is the high point 45 caliber.
Let's say high point right there.
Yes,
Firearms, 45
yes,
ACP.
yes.
I'll move that as exhibit 121. And can you identify this?
And this is the magazine from the high point 45 caliber.
And maybe a little hard to see, but what's the numbering and letter here?
45R,
Is that identifying 45 caliber magazine?
yes.
That's exhibit 122. And Agent Gooch, what is this?
This is the serial number from the high point.
Why is it important to close-up photograph a serial number of a weapon?
Because each handgun or any type of weapon will have a different serial number.
So it's an identification mark.
Yes.
Move that as exhibit 123. And what is this photograph?
So this is after we ejected the magazine, and those were the rounds to the left that were in the magazines. And the round to the right is the round that was inside the chamber of the high point.
Move that as exhibit 124. Agent Gooch, can you identify this?
Yes, this is more live ammunition in the backpack along with a knife and a lighter.
Move that as exhibit 125. And Agent Gooch, can you identify this photograph, please?
Yes, this is Mr. Wiggins' wallet along with his identification card.
So previously, we had seen a photograph with an identification card that appeared to be outside of the wallet. Is this a second identification, or had the ID been placed back into his wallet?
I think it's a second identification card.
Move that as exhibit 126. Agent Gooch, can you identify this photograph?
Yeah, so this is just additional live rounds of ammunition that was found in the backpack along with a knife and a lighter.
This knife, can you read the lettering on this?
T lead, so that's TLEEDS.
You know what that stands for?
I know that's a training academy for police officers just in Tennessee.
Ultimately, this investigation.
Yes, Sergeant Baker.
Move that as exhibit 127. Is this a close-up of Sergeant Baker's knife?
Yes.
Move that as exhibit 128. Agent Gooch, do you know what this key is?
This is the backup key for Sergeant Baker for his vehicle.
Okay, backup key to unit 500.
Yes.
Move that as exhibit 129. And Agent Gooch, can you describe this photograph?
This is one of the ammunition boxes that were in his backpack.
Move that as exhibit 130. Are you caught up, Madam Clerk?
Okay.
You're good? All right, thank you. And can you identify this?
Yes,
Bullet.
this is a 9mm caliber of a bullet.
Was that also found in Mr. Wiggins' backpack?
Yes.
Move that as exhibit 131. And Agent Gooch, can you identify this photograph?
Yes, this is another magazine that was found inside the backpack.
And you know what caliber ammunition this magazine is containing?
Yes, this is a 9mm.
Is that a 9mm? See at the top?
Yes.
Move that as exhibit 132. And is this a close-up of the same 9mm magazine?
Yes.
That is exhibit 133. Can you describe this photograph, please?
And this is just after emptying the magazine and the live rounds that were inside of it.
I'll move that as exhibit 134. Agent Gooch, it appears we have a photograph of a separate set of keys. Is that correct?
Yes,
And do you know what these keys belong to or who they belong to?
yes, these are Sergeant Baker's keys.
Move this as exhibit 135. Again, we have a close-up of, I think, the same keys that were represented in exhibit 135. Is that correct?
Yes,
Move this as exhibit 136. And can you identify this?
yes, this is the original key from Sergeant Baker's vehicle.
Okay, so we have two keys to Sergeant Baker's Unit 500.
Yes,
This is one, and it's got a identifying number on it of, I think that's 6306.
yes,
And then we'd previously seen an individual key with the same identifying number.
yes,
Move this as exhibit 137. And Agent Gooch, can you identify this?
yes, this is Mr. Wiggins' social security card.
That was also found in his backpack.
Yes,
That is exhibit 138. And what is this photograph?
these are just various of cards that we found inside of Mr. Wiggins' backpack.
This is exhibit 139. What is this photograph?
And this is just another compartment of Mr. Wiggins' backpack with a scale.
All right, what's a scale?
So typically, these are used just to weigh different items, sometimes for drug paraphernalia.
All right, move this as exhibit 140. And Agent Gooch, can you identify this photograph?
Yes, and this is the scale.
Scale, this is the cover for the scale.
Yes,
And what is this?
that is just a bag of known to believe of drug paraphernalia.
Also found in the backpack.
Yes,
Move that as exhibit 141. Is this a close-up view of the previous baggie?
yes.
Have you ever heard these bags described as apple bags or pouches? How do you describe these little bags?
I just, I would just call that a clear baggie with unknown substance inside, a green unknown substance.
These are little tiny Ziploc bags.
Yes,
I'll move this as exhibit 142. All right, so that was the contents of Steven Wiggins' backpack, correct?
yes,
And did you also take his clothing items into custody?
yes.
And can you identify the next photograph?
This is Mr. Wiggins' blue jeans that he was wearing that day.
Now, he had been on the run since May 29th.
Yes,
And this was June 1st when you collected these pants.
yes.
Move that as exhibit 143. And what is this?
And that is Mr. Wiggins' shirt.
I'll move this as exhibit 144. If I could have just 1 second, Your Honor. Pass the witness.
Billy, you may cross-examine.
Clearly, Steven Wiggins was armed, dangerous, right?
Correct.
And you've done several interviews throughout the course of this investigation yourself, didn't you?
Yes,
Those interviews revealed Mr. Wiggins to be mentally unstable.
Calling for speculation.
But this witness has been qualified as an expert in the field of mental health, so therefore I sustain the objection.
All right.
It was also, pardon? So he said, your question was just, he appeared to be mentally unstable. Is that right? Dangerously mentally unstable?
I asked if, based on her interviews, she felt he was mentally unstable.
Right.
Yes, Your Honor.
I sustain the objection. It calls for speculation because she's not qualified as an expert witness.
I just wanted to make sure he was saying mental health.
Right.
Right. So obviously he was heavily armed. He had 2 firearms and a knife on his person, right? When you found him or when he was found.
yes,
He's been on the run for 2-3 days
yes,
and he was looked like he'd been either getting rained on or moving through bodies of water, and everything was wet. It appeared that you had recovered. Is that accurate?
Yes,
Now, all of these items that we just went through, none of this was found on Erika Castro-Miles, obviously, right?
correct.
She had already been in custody. All this was found on Mr. Wiggins.
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Anything, brother?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may
Thank
sit
you.
down and are we releasing her? You may go back to General Motors.
Judge, may we approach?
You may. With this off the record. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a little cubby hole around the corner here that's just right outside my door. And so to avoid having to send you out, we'll step around there from time to time. We're not doing anything other than trying to keep it all confidential. So with that, what I'm told is the next witness is going to be fairly lengthy. And since we're approaching the time we normally take a mid-morning break, we're going to go ahead and break for the mid-morning break. And that will allow us to come back in and take a little longer time with this next witness. So if you will step across, we'll take a 15-minute recess. Thank you.
All right. Where's the recess?
Where are we with our jury? We're going to go back in. Are they ready? All right. Let's bring Miss Castro-Miles in, please. You need the E team in here. General Crouch.
That'd probably be a good idea, Judge.
Maybe talking about keeping recess.
General Crouch, before we bring the jury in.
I would appreciate that, Judge. I'm sure he would appreciate that.
All right. Ready for the jury? Bring the jury in. We had these extra monitors installed there in front of you, so that you don't have to try to squint to see what's going on the big screen. Even with this giant TV here, it can be hard to do it. We stood over there and tried to look at it, but this was a grant that our local office and your county court clerk in Stewart County also applied for and got some grants to improve the rooms and things. But here we were able to add those screens so that when you have to watch a video or thing, you got it right there in front of you, which I think is a great improvement. So, all right, we are ready for the state's next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Special Agent Laura Bose.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Morning, Agent Bose.
Morning.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the court reporter?
Yes, my name is Special Agent Dr. Laura Bose, and my last name is spelled B-O-O-S.
Now, Agent, we've just called you a special agent. Where do you currently work?
I currently work at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. I work at the Nashville Crime Lab, and I work in the forensic biology unit.
And Agent Bose, if you would please just give the jury an overview of your educational background and employment.
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in natural science from Columbia College in Missouri. I have a master's degree in forensic science from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And I also have a PhD in microbiology, also from the University of Alabama at Birmingham.
And Agent Bose, at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, well, I'll do this first. We'll get this in. Agent, I handed you a document. Do you recognize what that document is?
Yes, this is my resume.
Okay, and does that include your educational and professional experience?
Yes, it does.
And are we would tender that as the next state's exhibit?
All right, will be marked as exhibit 145.
And Agent Bose, at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, what area do you specifically work with in forensic biology?
In forensic biology, basically, we work with biological evidence, typically blood, semen, saliva, skin cells, that type of evidence.
And have you previously been tendered an expert in the courts in Tennessee,
Yes,
and specifically our judicial district?
yes.
Your Honor, and in what subject was that?
Forensic biology.
Your Honor, this time we'd like to tender Special Agent Dr. Bose as a expert in forensic biology.
Any questions, Mr. Finley?
No, sir.
Then this witness will be qualified as an expert in the field of forensic microbiology.
Now, Agent, when you engage in testing for forensic biology, you mentioned that it was blood, semen, and other fluids. What specifically are you looking for?
Typically, I'm looking for any type of source that might have biological material from which I could develop a DNA profile.
Okay. And you're very familiar with your participation in this case, correct?
Yes,
Are you also a member of what's called the VCRT team?
yes, that's the violent crime response team.
And
Yes.
could you please explain to the jury what the VCRT team function is and what they do?
What we do, we are a group of scientists that are deployed to crime scenes, and basically we will document the crime scene, photography, and also video. We will take notes on our observations. We will look about that scene for possible evidence and make sure it is documented as well specifically. And then we will collect and preserve that evidence and then submit it to the TBI Crime Lab for testing.
And specifically in this case, were you requested to assist on May the 30th, 2018 to an officer involved shooting here in Dickson County?
Yes, I was.
And could you please, for the jury, explain what your involvement was?
My involvement was as the team leader for the team that was called out to this scene.
And what scene did you specifically attend to?
I tended to the part of the scene that was along Bird Road.
And what were your job duties as the team supervisor?
Basically just to coordinate the efforts that I already mentioned, to make sure everything gets documented, photographed on video, make sure the entire scene is processed for the possibility of evidence, and that it all gets recorded and collected properly.
And as part of your duties as a supervisor to also document what the team did once they were out there, who was involved, and if you all collected any specific pieces of evidence.
Yes, it is.
And did you produce a report on that?
I did.
I can approach on it. Agent Bose, I handed you a multiple page document, 2-page document. Do you recognize what that document is?
Yes, that's my official crime scene report.
And is what we see on the screen the same copy?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And if you would please just go ahead and explain sort of the contents of the document. Like,
Starting at the top left, we have the 2 line, which is basically the person to whom this report will be issued, along with the DA's office involved. So that is our field agent that was involved in this case there. Under that, we have subjects, which are the subjects of the investigation, and they are listed and named there accordingly. Beneath that, the victim, Daniel Baker, is listed. And then there's a narrative sort of describing the process at the scene and the major points of working the scene. After that, we have the members that were present. So everyone who was at the scene from the team is listed below that. We have evidence collected at the scene, and that is line by line, just the evidence that was collected from the scene and documented and then submitted. It may not have necessarily been processed, but it was collected from the scene.
if you could scroll down just a little bit, please, Mr. Etheridge. Is that the continuation of items collected
Yes.
by the VCR team?
Yes.
And then you have another note there that says MCG, AJM, HH, KRO, LEB, assisted with the Sam Vineyard Road.
Yes, those were members that originally went out with us together, but they actually were asked to assist with the other portion of this scene.
Now, Agent, when you're all out there, when you say that you're assisting processing this, are you taking samples of anything that you find to also have a biological significance or evidentiary value scientifically?
Yes, the forensic biologist would typically be the person to do that, but I could do that as well for both scenes that took place.
Okay. Your Honor, we would move the crime scene, official crime scene report as the state's next exhibit, which I believe is exhibit number 146.
I'm sorry, the next exhibit in order would be 146.
146, yes, sir. Now, Agent Bose, on this case, you not only went out to the scene at Bird Road, which is where Unit 500 was, but you also did DNA and serology analysis. Is that correct?
Yes,
On
I did.
evidence that was submitted. And in fact, you've issued about a 14-page report.
Yes, I have 2 reports from the work that I actually performed back at the lab.
We'll go by the first report first, which will be the July 10th, 2018 report.
Yes,
Do you have a copy of that?
I do.
I'm also going to hand you a copy. Before we get into the specifics of your findings on the report, if we could take a minute to just discuss how you go about testing for DNA or serology on an item and what different findings you can have.
So for serology, in this case, the serology that I performed would be blood testing. I basically do a chemical color change test to determine the presence of blood, and then I use an antibody test to determine if that's human blood. In terms of DNA testing, there could be samples that don't require serology, but they might be of biological material that I could still get a DNA profile from. Do you want me to?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the process of obtaining a DNA profile, basically, once I have that sample, I place that sample into a tube. I add chemicals to it so that I can break open the cells and get the DNA just by itself. I'm not interested in the other cellular components. I want the DNA alone. Once I do that, I take a look at how much DNA I was able to obtain. And that's important information for the next step. And that next step is to target specific areas along that DNA strand and copy them. We call it amplification, but it's a copying process. So we build up those specific areas. Once those areas are targeted, we put them on an instrument, and that instrument will separate those targets by their size. After that, the computer software will turn those fragment sizes or targets into a number. And you end up with a series of numbers for all of those targets. So at the end of the process, what you have is a series of numbers, and that represents a forensic DNA profile.
Okay. Now, Agent, how do you go about comparing forensic DNA profiles?
We go through that process, say for an evidence sample. And then we will also go through the same process for a known DNA standard. So that's a sample that we know was collected and observed, and it's proper to be identified as from that person. It's like a template for comparison. So we do the same process for both types of samples, and then we're able to just compare those series of numbers.
Now, Agent, when you get samples, do you always have enough genetic information to make a complete comparison for a match or a rejection?
No, we don't. DNA standards typically are fine. We almost always are able to get a full profile from those. But evidence samples can be of any quality or quantity. And so sometimes we just don't end up with enough DNA to have a profile that's of comparable quality. And also it could just be there's a very large mixture. If we get too many people together, we can't really resolve those appropriately. And so there's a lot of reasons why something would be inconclusive, but typically it's because of not enough DNA or not enough high quality DNA.
Now, Agent, if you could please talk a little bit about when you start to say a mixture of DNA, a major or a minor contributor, and what that actually means.
So if I identify something as a major contributor on my report, that simply means that that person's DNA was represented more in that mixture than, say, the other person or all the other people. That's all that refers to. So you could have a major person who contributed or a major mixture, and then a minor would just be who had less DNA contributed to that mixture.
Now, Agent, if you would please just take a minute and explain, when you test a sample for DNA, every time you touch something, do you necessarily leave DNA?
Not necessarily. You probably leave DNA, but you may not leave enough. So just because somebody has handled or touched something doesn't necessarily mean that I would be able to develop a profile from that interaction.
All right, thank you. If you could turn to your report now from July the 10th, 2018. And in this case, not only were you out at the scene collecting some biological samples, but you were also testing for any forensic biology on specific items submitted by other agents. Is that correct?
Yes, anything that comes in for the case, whether it be from TBI or others that needs forensic biology testing, I would have done that.
And Agent, if you could look up at the screen, do you recognize, is that a copy of the report that I had handed you?
Yes, it is. I've looked and
Okay.
all the pages are
All
here,
the
yes.
pages. Okay. And could you please again explain the top portion of this, and then as we go down, we'll start talking about things individually. Again,
So,
sorry, the two again to.
Two is Nathan Nason, and he would be our agent that this report would need to be sent to when it was completed. Again, below that, we have subjects, and we have those listed, Erika Castro-Miles and Steven Wiggins. Below that, victim Daniel Baker. The received from and received by indicates to you basically who has submitted that evidence to the lab and who at the lab who has received it. And it gives you the day and time as well. So you can keep up with chain of custody, if you will.
And we have what's listed as exhibits on the left. Could you explain the significance of the exhibit numbers to you all at the lab?
Yes, at the laboratory, once something is submitted, it is given a unique exhibit number by evidence receiving. We may modify that in the individual units, but it's assigned a number that we will then keep throughout the case. And so the exhibit number that is listed, you know, the two there for the Saturn, that's going to be consistent throughout. And it's going to be consistent for everyone's reports at the lab, not just forensic biology.
Now, in this specific report, the items that we have that are going to be listed as exhibits, those were all items that were submitted for forensic testing to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the first item that is listed as the Ford Police Interceptor. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that Unit 500 that was down on Bird Road?
Yes.
And exhibit number 2, the Saturn LS, was that the Saturn LS on Tidwell Switch?
Yes.
Okay. And then when we come down, we have specific individual items. And number 3 is a pink jacket. And how are they listed now for descriptors? Do they talk about where the item came from and what the item might physically be?
Typically, it gives a description of the item and where it was recovered from. Sometimes you might just have what the item is, but it's a brief description of the item of evidence.
So in this listing, we have items from Ms. Castro-Miles, and then we have things from Sam Vineyard Road. Specifically, when we get down to numbers like 13, it says a swab from Sam Vineyard Road, and it has a number 8 on that.
Yes.
Does that number 8 correspond with an evidence marker that was out there at the scene?
Yes. Yes.
So previously, Agent Kennard has testified and put up a diagram that had RBS swabs that were listed with marker numbers.
Yes.
These are the corresponding swabs from that, correct?
Yes, the swab box, again, I wasn't at that scene, but when I opened the box, that was indicated on the swab box. So I've tried to reference those on my report because I do know that the scene numbers and our exhibit numbers might not be the same. So you can rely on the number in the parentheses to correspond with what he was talking about. And then the number to the left is going to be the laboratory number.
Perfect, thank you. If you could scroll down, we'll look at the items on page number 2. And there we now start to see a rifle and magazine from the Ford Police Interceptor and clothing swabs and duty belts from Sergeant Baker.
Yes.
And then we have fingernail clippings from Daniel Baker.
Yes.
And then we go down to the high point pistol from Steven Wiggins' backpack and the Glock 33 from Mr. Wiggins' backpack.
Yes.
And then we have what's called a known buccal swab or buccal swab. Could you explain what that is?
Yes, that's actually the known DNA standard I was referring to earlier. So that is a sample that has been collected for the purpose of comparison. So we know who it's from, and that's considered a known sample. And there are several in this case,
And
known samples.
In this case, we have one from Sergeant Daniel Baker, Stephen
Yes.
Joshua Wiggins, and Erika Castro-Miles.
Yes.
And then if you could scroll down a little bit, please, Mr. Etheridge. Once we get down to exhibit number 53 or so, we now have clothing from Mr. Wiggins that was submitted.
Yes.
And then starting at exhibit number 70, those appear to be items that were in the Saturn LS that was at Tidwell Switch.
Yes, the Saturn.
And then if you could scroll down, please. And then we have items number 95 through 106, which appear to be items that were found in the police interceptor.
Yes.
And then we have the 2 known standards. And then it appears that there were some swabs that were taken from the Saturn LS. And finally, a holster
Yes.
from the passenger front seat of the Ford Interceptor.
Yes.
Okay. So now we're going to get into and go through all of the different results that you produced in this report. If we would, we can just start talking about exhibit number 1. And that was the police interceptor in total. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what does your note correspond with?
My note basically is letting you know when you get to the specific items I have listed, those are from the interceptor. So basically that result is just telling you to see those other exhibits for exactly what I have tested from that vehicle.
Okay, thank you. And then exhibit number 2 was the Saturn LS. And you have specific information about no presence of blood on the interior or exterior, except the door frame. Is that correct?
Yes, and so I've noted that as my testing for that vehicle. And then also I have a list of reference exhibit numbers to see later on in the report that refer to that Saturn.
All right. And then moving on, exhibits number 3, 4, 5, and 6. Number 3 would correspond to Ms. Castro-Miles' pink jacket, then her shirt, her underwear, and shorts. So her clothing. Could you explain what the presumptive tests not indicating blood means?
Basically, I've taken a look at all of those items and I've conducted the serology testing that I spoke of earlier on those items. And with all of those items, I found them to be negative for the presence of blood.
Now, when you were looking for the presence of blood, are you looking for a specific stain that you can see with the naked eye?
Yes, we're first going to do a visual examination. So obviously, if anything stands out to me, I'm going to specifically hone into that particular area. But if nothing does, I will then actually test the entire item for trace amounts of blood that I might not be able to see. So the items are examined in their entirety.
And you have a result continuing on 7 and 8 that they're on her jewelry and her shoes, that they were negative for blood. Did you do any
Yes.
other DNA testing on those items?
No, those items were tested for blood.
All right, and we'll move along to exhibit number 11, which is the access card from Sam Vineyard Road. Did you find any blood or DNA on that?
I did find the presence of blood and it tested positive for human. So moving forward, I will just indicate to you that I found the presence of human blood. And I did find a DNA profile that matched exhibit 118A, which was the known standard from Daniel Baker.
And then exhibit number 12A was the button that was found on Sam Vineyard Road. And could you explain that?
Yes, I tested that and it was positive for blood. I was unable to do that antibody test because I had a limited sample. So I could not determine if that was human blood with the serology test. The profile that I obtained was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, at least one was male, and the major contributor profile matched exhibit 118, Daniel Baker.
So
And-
again, doctor, in this, because you said that there's a mixture, you didn't have enough information to give a positive identification for either gender or for a positive identification of the person. Is that correct?
For the minor,
Yes.
yes, for the minor, it was inconclusive. I can't give you any more information about it other than there was a second contributor at least present. I just can't say anything further.
Okay, thank you. And exhibit number 13A is going to be a swab from Sam Vineyard Road, marker number 8. Did you get a DNA profile for that?
Yes, it tested positive for human blood, and then I was able to obtain a profile that matched exhibit 118A, which is Daniel Baker.
Exhibit number 14A, I believe we've seen a picture with Agent Kennard about this. It's a glove that was found on Sam Vineyard Road. Did you get any DNA profile on that?
I obtained a very limited DNA profile on that item. It was consistent with at least one male, but I was unable to say anything further. It was basically inconclusive at that point.
And Agent, numbers 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 are all samples of red blood stain, or the RBS, from Sam Vineyard Road with evidence marker numbers. Did you get one profile for all of those blood stains?
Yes, so my testing indicated the presence of human blood, and then the DNA profiles I obtained from those samples matched exhibit 118A, which is Daniel Baker. And that was for all of those.
So conclusively, that was Daniel Baker's blood on the RBS swabs on Tidwell Switch Road.
Yes.
And then on exhibit number 22 exhibit number 21 is a sunglasses piece from Sam Vineyard Road.
Yes, I did test one stain on there and it was negative for the presence of blood.
And exhibit number 22 are the broken sunglasses from Sam Vineyard Road.
Yes, I swabbed the nose and earpiece areas of that particular item, and the profile I obtained matched exhibit 118A, Daniel Baker.
And exhibit number 23 were the sunglass lenses, also from Sam Vineyard Road. And did you have any testing on that?
I did not. That particular item was reserved for latent print examination.
And why would you reserve something for a latent print examination?
If it's a type of surface or particular item that is just better suited for a latent print examination, I'm going to just turn that over to them and they will do the same for us. If something is just better suited for DNA versus latents, we will make that decision together.
And then exhibit number 24 was a cigarette from Sam Vineyard Road. Did you have any conclusive matches for that?
I did not any matches, no.
And then we'll move on to exhibit number 41, which is the rifle and magazine that was from the Ford Police Interceptor. Did you do any testing on that?
I swabbed it for DNA, but I was unable to obtain a DNA profile.
And we'll go on to exhibit number 41B, which was 26 223 cartridges from the magazine. Was that in the weapon?
Yes, and I did not perform any examination on those.
Exhibit number 42 is going to be the shotgun shells from the Ford Police Interceptor. Did you swab those and have any results?
I did swab a stain. And that was indicated as number 1. It was positive for the presence of blood, but I had a limited sample, so I wasn't able to do the human testing. The DNA profile that I obtained matched exhibit 118A, Daniel Baker.
Now we're going to move on to exhibit number, I believe, 43, which were all swabs from Daniel Baker's clothing.
I have another result for
Oh, I'm sorry.
42A.
Yes.
Do you want?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So I also swabbed the non-stained areas of that particular item. I obtained a profile that was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor was consistent with Daniel Baker, and the minor contributor was inconclusive.
Okay, thank you. Now we can move on to 43. And 43 has a couple different components with it.
Yes.
So if you could please just explain methodically what those were.
Yes, so the first sample were swabs from the back of Daniel Baker's shirt. From that, I obtained a DNA profile consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male, and the major contributor was consistent with Daniel Baker. The minor contributor was inconclusive. Next, I had swabs from the back of his pants. The profile was a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male, and the major contributor was Daniel Baker. The minor contributor there was also inconclusive. I next tested swabs from the front of his pants. The profile was consistent with a mixture of at least 3 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile was consistent with a mixture of 2 individuals, and Daniel Baker and Steven Wiggins were included in that mixture. And Daniel Baker was an assumed contributor, and the deduced contributor was consistent with Steven Wiggins. The minor contributor for that was also inconclusive. Swabs from the right boot. The DNA profile was consistent with a mixture from at least 3 individuals, including at least 1 male. And the major contributor profile was consistent with Daniel Baker. The minor contributor was inconclusive. Had swabs from the left boot. The profile was consistent with a mixture from at least 3 individuals, including at least 1 male. And the major contributor was consistent with Daniel Baker, and the minor contributor was inconclusive.
Now, this is the first time that we've seen a 3-person mixture in this. We have a major contributor, another defined contributor, and then a minor profile that was inconclusive.
Yes.
Exhibit number 45 should be Sergeant Daniel Baker's duty belt. And again, that has several different components with it.
It does. The first was a swab from the dual magazine pouches. The DNA profile I obtained was consistent with Daniel Baker. I had one additional allele or marker show up on that profile. And due to that limited information, I could make no comparisons to that. So it was inconclusive. I had a swab from a radio pouch, a swab from handcuff pouches, swab from the pistol holster, and a swab from the pepper spray pouch. And the DNA profile from all of those were all consistent with Daniel Baker. A swab from the remaining belt areas produced a profile that was also consistent with Daniel Baker.
And Agent, on that, on number 6, a swab from the remaining belt areas, there also was an additional
Yes,
allele.
yes. One additional allele or marker. Again, there's not a lot that I can do with that limited information.
And that just means that there's the possibility of presence of somebody else's DNA, correct?
Yes, I've got one marker and I can't do any comparisons.
And exhibit number 49,
49, the DNA profile that I obtained was consistent with Daniel Baker.
and those were Sergeant Baker's nail clippings, that's correct?
Yes.
And then we're moving on to exhibit number 50A, which is the high point pistol and magazine from Steven Wiggins' backpack, and that has a couple different explanations.
Yes, so for 50A, I tested it for blood and it was negative for blood. The pistol was swabbed on the grip, trigger, and slide pull areas, and the profile I obtained was consistent with exhibit 52A, which was Steven Wiggins. The magazine was swabbed in the loading and bottom areas, and the profile was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile was consistent with Steven Wiggins, and the minor contributor profile was inconclusive.
And moving on to exhibit number 51, which is the Glock 33 pistol from Mr. Wiggins' backpack.
Yes, that pistol tested negative for the presence of blood. And the grip, trigger, and slide pull areas were swabbed for DNA, and a limited DNA profile was obtained. It was consistent with at least 1 male, but due to that limited information, there was nothing further that I could do with it. So it was inconclusive.
And exhibit number 52 was the known standard. So there was no
Yes.
analysis done on that other than.
I do the
running it.
DNA testing, but that's the only result. I got a full profile from it.
And then numbers 53 through 55 are actually Mr. Wiggins' clothing.
Yes.
His shirt, his jeans, his belt, his shoes, his underwear, and his socks. Did you
Yes,
find any
yes.
blood on those?
No, I did not.
And did you do any more DNA testing?
No, I did not.
And then number 56 appears to be the Mr. Wiggins' backpack. Did you find anything on that?
Yes, my test indicated the presence of blood. And again, it was limited, so I was unable to do a human hemoglobin test. I cut 2 stains for DNA testing. Stain number 1 produced no DNA profile, and stain number 2 also produced no DNA profile.
Now, moving on to exhibit number 70, we're looking at bottles from the driver's side rear floorboard of the Saturn that was, I guess we have it listed as Sam Vineyard Road here, the Saturn LS.
Yes.
Could you please explain, I guess, exhibit number 70 has 3 items with it, 3 different bottles.
Yes, it has a mellow yellow bottle indicated as number 1, a mellow yellow bottle indicated as number 2, and then a Coke bottle indicated as number 3. And basically on those, I swabbed the cap and the mouth areas where one would expect somebody to have that bottle or can drinking from it, saliva perhaps, or skin cells from the mouth might be transferred. So that's what I test on those particular items. For the mellow yellow bottle number 1, I obtained a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor was from Erika Castro-Miles, and the minor contributor was inconclusive. The second mellow yellow bottle, the profile matched Steven Wiggins, and the Coke bottle produced a profile that matched Erika Castro-Miles.
And then exhibit number 73 are paddles that were on the passenger side front floorboard from the Saturn. And were those tested as well?
Yes, and they were tested in a similar manner as the others. The Sunkist bottle had a DNA profile that matched Erika Castro-Miles. That was Sunkist bottle number 1. Sunkist bottle number 2 also had a DNA profile that matched Erika Castro-Miles.
And exhibit number 78 is a Fanta bottle from the driver's side floorboard.
Yes, the DNA profile from that item was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile was consistent with Steven Wiggins, and the minor contributor profile was inconclusive.
Thank you. Exhibit number 80 are bottles from the passenger side rear floorboard, 2 of those.
Yes, I had a Diet Mountain Dew bottle, and that DNA profile was a mixture of 2 individuals, and Steven Wiggins and Erika Castro-Miles were consistent with being contributors to that mixture. The Snapple bottle had a DNA profile that matched Erika Castro-Miles.
And moving on to exhibit number 84, which are the key ring from the passenger side of the Saturn. I believe those were in the seat. Was that tested?
Yes, the Saturn key was swabbed for DNA testing, and I obtained a limited DNA profile. It was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male, but due to the limited information I obtained, it was simply inconclusive.
I'm going to ask you a question about, we've consistently seen at least 1 male.
Yes,
Is there a reason that these are coming as at least 1 male? Can you find female markers as well?
when you have male DNA, there will be what we would consider some female markers in there. But in terms of at least, or when I say the minor is inconclusive, we typically cannot make any assessments about male or female for at least the minor, if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
Okay, I just don't know about the minor.
So when we say at least 1 male and we are inconclusive for the minor, you can't tell if it was a male or a female.
Correct. Typically, that is the case.
Right. Exhibit number 85 are 4 different cigarette butts that were from the front of the Saturn ashtray.
Yes. So for butts indicated as number 1 and 3, the DNA profile matched Erika Castro-Miles. For butt indicated number 2, the profile matched Erika Castro-Miles. I did obtain an additional allele on that particular cigarette butt. And again, due to that limited information, it was simply inconclusive. But indicated as number 4, the profile was from an unknown female source. I've indicated that as female number 1 on my report, and Erika Castro-Miles was excluded as the contributor to that profile.
Exhibit number 86 is a cigar tip from the driver's side front floorboard. Did you find any profile on that?
I did not. No DNA profile was obtained from that.
Now, exhibit number 87 has several components for it. It's simply listed as swabs from the Saturn LS. Can you explain where the swabs were and what the results were?
Yes, so swabs from the gear shift. I obtained a limited DNA profile consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. But due to the limited information, it was inconclusive for comparison purposes. Swabs from the steering wheel. I obtained a DNA profile consistent with a mixture of just 2 individuals. Steven Wiggins and Erika Castro-Miles were consistent with being contributors to that mixture profile. Swabs from the driver exterior door handle. I obtained a limited DNA profile consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male, but it was, because of the limited information, inconclusive. Swabs from the passenger front exterior door handle. I obtained a limited profile. Same as before, where there's 2 individuals, at least 1 male, but overall the profile is inconclusive for comparison purposes.
And then there was no examination on specific areas. Is that correct?
Yes,
And they were the driver's side front door armrest, passenger side armrest and knob, lights control, emergency brake, and the windshield wipers control.
Yes.
Exhibit number 95 is now moving on to items found in the Ford Interceptor unit number 500. Exhibit number 95A was cell phone parts and rechargeable battery from the driver's side front floorboard of the police Interceptor. Could you
Yes.
explain that, Steen?
Yes, so I had a silver cell phone back. I swabbed it for DNA testing, the non-stained edge and included the buttons. I obtained a limited DNA profile. It was consistent with a mixture of at least two, including at least one male, but it was inconclusive for comparison purposes. I also tested a stain from that item, and it tested positive for human blood. The DNA profile was consistent with a mixture of at least two individuals, including at least one male, and the major contributor profile matched Steven Wiggins. Due to the limited minor contributor profile that I obtained, that was inconclusive for comparison purposes. The rechargeable battery that was included with that exhibit, I tested a stain from that item, and it was positive for human blood, and the profile matched Steven Wiggins. There was an additional allele, sorry. There was an additional allele, and that was inconclusive as the others have been.
Exhibit number 97 is an oil container for the passenger rear side.
Yes, I tested a stain from that exhibit. It was positive for blood. I was unable to perform the human blood test or the human hemoglobin test because of a limited sample. The profile was consistent with Daniel Baker.
102A was the baton from the driver's side rear seat of the Ford Police Interceptor. I think we also call that typically his ASP. Did you do any DNA analysis on that?
Yes, I also have another result for that, the oil bottle. Do you want that one?
Sure.
Okay, sorry. So the first part that I tested was a stain from that. And then I also did test the cap area. So that produced a profile that also matched Daniel Baker.
And if we can move on to 102 then.
So 102, I swabbed that item. It did not test positive for blood. And the DNA profile I obtained matched Daniel Baker. That one also had an additional allele, but due to that limited information, it was inconclusive.
And exhibit number 103 is the two-way radio from the front console area of the Ford Police Interceptor.
Yes, so I tested a stain and I also tested the non-stained areas. For the stain, it tested positive for human blood, and the DNA profile I obtained matched Daniel Baker. For the non-stained areas, I obtained a profile that was consistent with a mixture of two individuals. The major contributor profile matched Daniel Baker, and the minor contributor profile was consistent with Steven Wiggins.
Okay. Exhibit number 104A.
Yes, I had a stain that I tested from that item as well as the non-stained areas. The stain tested positive for blood, but I was unable to perform a human hemoglobin test because it was a limited sample. The profile matched Daniel Baker. In the non-stained areas, the DNA profile I obtained matched Daniel Baker.
And then we're finished with number 104, Doctor.
Yes,
Exhibit number 105 was a wallet on the back seat.
yes. That item tested negative for the presence of blood. I did swab it for DNA, and the DNA profile I obtained was consistent with a mixture of at least 3 individuals, including at least one male. The major contributor profile was from an unknown female, indicated on my report as female number 2. Exhibit 117A, which is Erika Castro-Miles, was excluded as the source of that major profile. And the limited minor contributor profile was inconclusive.
Now, when we say the limited minor profile, when you've excluded the defendant for the major, that doesn't necessarily exclude the minor, is that correct?
No, the minor's inconclusive, so I've made no comparisons or assessment on the minor. So just for the major, which was the unknown female, I have excluded her.
Exhibit number 106 is the swab from inside of the Ford Police Interceptor. And there's a couple of those, actually there's more than a couple of those, as there's several different areas that were swabbed.
Yes. So the first was swabs from the window ledge area, driver's side door interior. Negative for blood and no profile was obtained. Swabs from the driver's side door window controls. Negative for the presence of blood. The profile matched Daniel Baker. Swabs from the gear shift were negative for the presence of blood. And a limited profile was obtained, consistent with the mixture from at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. But the profile itself was too limited and was inconclusive. Swabs from the steering wheel indicated the presence of blood, but the testing for human hemoglobin, or to say it's human blood, were not performed. It was a limited sample. The limited profile was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male, and it was inconclusive beyond that. Swabs from the driver's side front door armrest area did not indicate the presence of blood. The limited profile was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male, and further assessment was inconclusive. Swabs from the driver's side rear door armrest area indicated the presence of blood. I did not perform human hemoglobin test because it was limited. The profile was a mixture from at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male, and the major contributor matched Daniel Baker. The minor contributor was inconclusive. Swabs from the passenger side front door armrest area were negative for blood, and a limited DNA profile was obtained from at least 1 individual, but beyond that, the profile was inconclusive. Swabs from the passenger side rear door armrest area